So welcome everyone to the Independent Redistricting Commission for the City of Escondido. Thanks so much for all the those in attendance via Zoom and those who've attended here in council chambers. Quick roll call. See, we have two of our members on Zoom. Commissioner Jurgensen, here, perfect. Commissioner Saldana.
Here.
All right, and now going around the dais, Commissioner Reyes. Commissioner Dowan.
Here.
Chair Case. Commissioner Reynoso. Commissioner Clemens.
Here.
All right, everyone is in attendance. First, we have oral communication. Mr. Hefner, did you want to speak on oral communication, or did you have a specific item that you wanted to speak on for the agenda?
Yeah, I do not. I'm just here to observe.
Okay.
To see what this is about, and then if there is something that I need to speak to after or maybe I can speak to that.
Perfect. That sounds great, Mr. Hefner. Yeah, no worries. Anyone via Zoom, any members of the public, would you like to speak on oral communications at this time? All right, I see none. So moving on to the approval of the September 27th, 2021 minutes. Those were included in the agenda packet that was emailed to the commissioners and posted online. Any questions or thoughts? Otherwise, we can entertain a motion in a second for that.
I'd like to motion to approve.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? No. All those in favor, please raise your hand so we can have our Zoom friends do the same. Right. Motion approved, and motion approved unanimously. Thank you, Commissioner Saldana. And now moving on to item number 4, so public outreach. I want to give you some background, and for those members of the public who are attending as well, as we spent time last 2 meetings discussing how to conduct public outreach, one of the items that came up was how we would actually do so with regards to the City of Escondido assisting in that, as opposed to using a separate outreach firm. We did solicit quotes from individuals to actually do this for us. We were unable to find an organization willing to do so, given our budget was set at $20,000. So Teresa Collins and Michael Thorne, who represent the Communications and Community Services Department, decided they were able to assist us with that. And at last meeting, Teresa Collins and Michael provided an overview of what they could do, mostly including a direct mail to voters in the City of Escondido or residents in the City of Escondido. And as a result of that, now they're going through the process of gaining quotes. Teresa sent me an email. I'm going to read it to you because she wanted me to share this with you because she would like some feedback to actually get a proper number from the different organizations that could conduct this mailing for us, because right now we do not have the official quotes. And I'll just read it verbatim so that way we have this. So Teresa said, "We wanted to provide you with a quick update for you to share at the meeting tonight. Flyers were passed out at the street fair, and you can print more of those for the commissioners as needed, and I believe 3 of our commissioners will be able to speak about that later. David Ross from the Times Advocate has inquired to do a feature on the process of redistricting. So as you know, we had an article in the Union Tribune that I sent to the commission, and we now have another one potentially coming out from the Times Advocate. Furthermore, they said we reached out to to get additional information about the mailing, specifically the mailing lists and the recycled paper. We are at a standstill until we are ready for a formal quote, which would be good for 30 days. I believe we want the mailings to go out after the first of the year, so we need to obtain quotes by mid-November. Direction is needed from the commissioners is for the size of the actual postcard, as this will impact the cost. The water quality report postcard is a half-page card, which is what we have estimated the pricing on. If you recall, the initial estimates were approximately $17,000 to $18,000. There's a smaller and larger option, quarter-page or a jumbo, which is a full-page postcard. And we want to be sure we are getting these apples-to-apples quotes, so we would like to ask the commissioner's preference on the sizing. And in addition, and that's the end of her email, and in addition, you might recall, we wanted to be focused in on whether we want to include businesses as a part of that quote as well. That is not included in this email as it relates to their thought process. So I don't know if you have any thoughts as to which size you'd like us to get quotes for, but her statement says that we need to be able to have this by mid-November in order to have this ready to go in January or before January. And that's basically it. So any thoughts or questions, insights on that? Yeah, the question is, would you like to use a half page? Would you like to do a jumbo page? Would you like to do a smaller option? And then on top of that, what is not included in the email was whether we were going to scale down, because I remember we talked about that, had a thorough discussion about this, about whether we'd want to include the businesses as part of the mailing or just going directly to residents. And right now I don't have in that information what the cost differential would be from Teresa related to the business versus the residents. Yes.
So I think the business should be out because we're here, we're redistricting for constituents and not businesses, although they have a vested interest, right? So businesses don't vote, basically, and that's what this process is about. So that's my thought on that, and I'm interested to see what everybody else thinks. As far as like the size of the mailer, I think that QR codes are like so instrumental these days, and especially after our experience at the street fair, seeing that little flyer and the tool very effective.
Yeah.
So I would think smaller would be better based on our limited budget. With that being said, I think that we will likely have to ask for a budget increase, and we should. That's just my opinion. So my thoughts on it is kind of, I would say, the question is, are we going to increase the budget? And if so, bigger is better with the postcards. If not, then, and it's like a time-sensitive thing because we need to have the approval before, right? So on and so forth. So if we're not going to ask for more, I think the smaller the card, the better. If we are going to ask for more, then the larger the better. That's just my thoughts.
I do have a comment. Couple things. Number one is I'd like to know, a suggestion, I should say, that a full page of advertisement is wonderful. And I would like to see that in the communities, within the Escondido communities, small businesses, minority advertisement in terms of their own, within their own language. I know that there are several advertisement in Spanish that I have seen, and also there got to be some advertisement for different languages. The Vietnamese, the Chinese, the Laos, and all of that. Although they represent a small community, but those are very significant votes that we need to hear them, So those are the recommendation, and also it's like the chair mentioned, the money. It's coming down to money, the cost. If we know how much it's going to cost us to do all kind of advertisement within the city of Escondido, then maybe the rebudgeting that we need to, take that into consideration, that maybe we should need to increase the funding amount available so we can get the good outreach company bidding for it.
So I think that we should probably try to go with the most effective type of outreach. I really, I think and agree with Amy that we should target certain advertisements for certain communities. I think that's absolutely great. When I think of a mass mailer, I think of what I do with my mass mail, and I just throw it into the trash. So from like that perspective, I'm sure that there are many people who still go through their mail. I just want to make sure that we're not creating a lot of waste and not getting a good return on our investment. So what I would say is probably moving more towards the quarter page and then just to the residences.
If I could make a comment, the reason why I thought it was very, very effective based on the last election for the city council, and the reason why I said this is because I get calls from the community letting me know, wow, I'm able to read in with the language that they need to understand who they need to vote for within their own district, number one. And number two is that the mass mailing, if you do it half page, it's not an eye-catching item. Because for me, I see a full page and, with the information on that full page, and for me, it is very, very advantageous, for me to look through it. And people call and said, wow, it's a very good information that they're able to read within their own language. And so I thought, those comments makes a lot of sense.
Right. I completely agree. I think that if we're going to do that, though, we'll need to design the mailer in such a way that people can access it in their language, right? So we can't, design a certain number of advertisements in, I don't know, Mandarin and then know who to send them to in the community, right? I don't think we have statistics or, we don't know which residencies primarily speak Mandarin, right? So I think if we design it in such a way where we say like, oh, you use the QR code, and that specifically is in a bunch of languages, and then going back to what Teresa said last time, where it goes to our website where they can then choose their preferred language. Or, Amy, are you saying that we should, create different sites in the language specifically and not have that drop down?
Since you asked that question, it makes a lot of sense. But then maybe we have to refer back to the city staff and find out what are they doing in terms of advertising, what type of, how are they doing it currently? Because you wanted to reach out to all of them all at one time.
Absolutely.
And there has to be a way, either they're using technical and sort it out and figure it out which area has a more, the majority of the language need. I'm using as an example because I don't know how we do that, but let's say District 1, the majority is Spanish, and then you do the 50% mail out. I believe you might be able to locate the language needs on the, based on the address, right? Is because when they register to vote, they would definitely indicate the language that they need to receive the material. So would that be the tools that the city is able to do it, to identify which mailer need which certain language? Because
thank you, Commissioner Down. To answer your question, so a few different points to I think would be important to address. Number one, specifically related to language. So per the consent decree, we are required to do our public noticing and do all the advertising for our public hearings that are going to happen. The actual legal noticing is going to have to be done in Spanish, English, Tagalog, Mandarin, and then Vietnamese. And in doing that, by having that done, that's already built in, that's going to be part of our process. This advertisement, I think, is slightly separate from that, as I think the dialogue had happened over the last two meetings was that this individual mailer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we'd identified we wanted to have it in only English and Spanish. If I'm not mistaken, it was going to be like a two-sided mailer in English and Spanish. And I believe there was a cost associated with that. If we were to do the mailer targeting every language, I think that the cost became increasingly more expensive, but the amount of public outreach that still will be, the public will still be informed, and we'll be doing our advertisement, not just in the Times Advocate, but also in the language-specific newspapers. And it's like, not La Esperanza, but we have to do this for the elections every 2 years as well. So it'll be the same process that we'll be using for this. Then when it comes to budgetary issues, that'll come up in our next, in a few items from now. But just to give you a baseline overview, if we were to make the adjustment of not doing the online version or virtual version of translation, it will reduce our budget from where we're at 199,000 right now to 176,000. So it will give us some more buffer if we wanted to expand that. And I'll go into that in more detail on that item, but we will have more money that we could allocate towards the public outreach at this moment. Therefore, if you were to go for either a full page advertisement, we could do that, or if you were to stay at a quarter or a half page, but then we just expand the number of people that we're reaching out to or the volume, or we could look at alternatives. In addition to doing, say, an actual mailer, we could maybe do a robocall or a text message. I don't, there might be something that we might have room to do in addition to. So that's something I'd leave to Teresa and Michael to help us spell out. But we do have a little more flexibility financially to do more. Yeah. And then we do have a few public comments. I just want to read them just for our context right now. So Georgine Tomasi says that I believe a full page is better visually than. She says, target full pages for all businesses downtown, not as a flyer, but as something that can be posed in every window in town. And then we do have one member of the public requesting to speak at this time. So if you're okay with allowing that, they would have 3 minutes. Laura Hunter, if you can hear me, and if you don't mind unmuting, you have 3 minutes. Feel free to begin right now.
Great, thank you so much. So my name is Laura Hunter, and I apologize. This is the first meeting I've been able to make and figure out the technology, so sorry about that, I'm old. I apologize if this is redundant, but I was knowing that I wanted to participate in this. I've been talking with people who were active when this happened last time. And they said that the outreach process was really good, and the things that they really liked were the fact that there were many public meetings all over the city at different times of the day and in the evening. The schools were a very, very good location that were easy for people to get to, and really was hoping that all the meetings will have some kind of social media so that those of us that have members in the city, we can push that information out and make it more accessible. So I love the idea of the QR codes for the different languages, because that gets people in the right place. But there's a lot of people with, still flip phones and all that kind of stuff. So having public meetings where they're used to going would be a really great way to do it. So anyway, I just wanted to offer those few comments, and I'm very sorry you've already been over all of this and they're not relevant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Appreciate that. And yeah, just to answer that point, we will have our public hearings that take place in both February and in January are going to take place at 9 geographically diverse locations throughout the city at different days, at different times, including on a weekend. So we're doing our best in that respect. And then regarding social media, Teresa Collins and Michael Thorne outlined that they will be utilizing the city's Facebook and Instagram accounts to promote these meetings that take place. And we'll also be doing different things like utilizing Peach Jar with the school district to reach out as well. So it'll be trying to utilize various methods for those who are engaged with technology, but also those who do not have access or do not utilize technology. So we're trying to hit as broad of an audience as possible. So, yes. Yeah, Juan.
Yeah, so I think this discussion we're having right now is really good, and I think the issue that my fellow Commissioner Amy brought up is also really important, and I'm wondering if we can solve it through a simple design issue on the postcard or flyer, whether we decide full page, half page, by having just a simple sentence in each of those other 3 languages that direct people to where they need to go, so that we don't necessarily need to do this targeted outreach to individual households, but there can at least be something there to direct people who are monolingual readers in that language. And then also I had a question in terms of, so the quote that was provided earlier, was that only for the half page, the quarter page?
That was, let me pull up that message one more time.
While Zach does that, I think that's a great idea, and that addresses the commissioner's concern right on the head, right? Because if you have a QR code, that's great, but if you speak Mandarin and you don't speak Spanish or English, you're just gonna look at random QR codes? No, so that having that sentence I know that language. Oh, okay, that's what this is about. Let me check it out. I think that's great.
It was that for the half page was the quote, and that was to reach, I believe, 60,000, if I'm not mistaken. It was like 60,000 residents and businesses, and for about $17,000, $18,000.
Oh, residences and businesses. So if
Yeah.
we only sent it, as Chair Case had proposed, to only residences, it would be a lower fee?
Yeah, and it might be able to reach out to a broader audience potentially. And I'd have to let Teresa speak to that, but just based off of that original quote that she had shared with us a few meetings ago, that was around what she was looking at. It was like 60,000 residents and businesses, approximately $17,000 to $18,000, and it was for, according to this message, half page for the actual quote.
Well then, yeah, that's really interesting, because then that makes, for example, me being able to decide today what would be the best option kind of difficult, because what if we were to drop, what if the fee goes down to, let's say, $14,000 or $13,000? If it's only for residences, then the possibility of doing a full page ad, as multiple people have mentioned today, seems more, but from a budget perspective, potential. And then maybe for, as one of the members of the public, sorry, I missed her name, for businesses, we can provide them separate full-page flyers separately through a separate funding stream that isn't connected to this particular printing request. Yeah. So, I don't know, I feel kind of difficult in being able to make one of these budget decisions at this time, given our limited information.
So we only have to, can we get 2 quotes and only exercise one of them?
I believe we could. She specifically was requesting in this message that we would determine which particular size that we were going for. That's what she was requesting. She would like commission consensus on this particular item, but it's your discretion. You guys are the commission. So in that respect, if we can get two quotes, we'll go to get 2 quotes.
I don't know. I just think that size is not, the juice is not going to be worth the squeeze there as far as our return on investment by increasing the size. I think that a smaller postcard is, it's better for the environment. Like I said, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in the interest that we get from the public. And I think that with our budget constraints, we need to save every dollar that we can. And we don't kick off our tour until January, right? So I know that we're gonna find different angles to employ those funds that could be freed up by us going with a smaller postcard.
Yeah. Very good point.
And with that being said, I'm willing to vote today on the size, unless we want to wait to get those 2 quotes back. But I'm willing to vote if everyone else feels the same.
Yeah. And prior to taking a vote, Vice Chair Jurgensen would like to make a comment.
Yeah, just to kind of go on with the additional comments that you guys were saying, is that I do agree that for how much money we are going to spend on it, and mailers in general are thrown away by the most part. So I think we should go with the half page and then put our money towards the other outreach that will be available in person. And so I just wanted to make that comment that I'm for the half page, and then putting all the other stuff that that is very good information out to our community, but in another way. This mailer I think is to get as many people aware of it as possible, and then so they can come to the meetings, they can come and voice their opinion in all of our outreach. So that's my comment. Thank you.
We had one public comment that came through just on Zoom, said, when you have public hearings, where in the city will these meetings take place? The 2 school districts have multiple buildings and geographically strategically located areas in the city. People feel comfortable meeting at school sites, co-partner with the district so that they do not charge fees for holding the meetings at schools, could save some rental fees. To answer the question, is that we have already scheduled the meetings. They're posted on the city's website on the redistricting page. So if you go to the city's website, you can see them there. And we are actually having the majority of our meetings at schools throughout the city of Escondido. San Pascual, Del Lago, Mission Middle. We're doing at also, I believe, I forget all of the names of the schools, but I think 7 out of the 9 public hearings, I believe, are at schools, if I'm not mistaken. So we're definitely diversifying ourselves throughout the city. So that's the answer to that question. And any other insight on this, commissioners?
Again, I'm going to approach it from a design perspective. If staff can at least ensure that it's very visually appealing and colorful and doesn't get lost in all the white and black flyers that or mail that people may receive, or white and blue, some bright colors so people don't immediately just drop it in the trash, as we've discussed at length today, then I would be okay with a half page. Again, if it's designed very well and visually appealing.
If that were the case, obviously, Michael Thorne and Teresa will be the ones designing this. We can request that, unlike the last time where we had to create a flyer very quickly for the public outreach of the Grand Avenue Festival, we could request that any materials they produce for this particular flyer, this particular design would come to the commission for approval. I think we'd want to do that anyways, but I just we could formalize that in the motion, I think would be helpful to make sure that we get this back to you for review.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, ladies first.
That's okay. Thank you. So maybe I didn't ask this question before, but because the beginning of the meeting, you mentioned that they pass out flyers at the street fairs. It is wonderful. It's good, but I'm sure the commissioner will agree. We would like to see the content of the information on the flyer as well, so we kind of know what it looks like, and maybe give us an opportunity to say, hey, make some changes or update this and update that. That would be very helpful. To be honest with you, I was waiting to see the content and the flyers before it's passed out at the street fairs, but I didn't know it was done, so.
And thank you, Commissioner Down. I apologize. There might have been miscommunication during our last meeting. I believe when came the decision for that, I think it was towards the end I asked for authority from the commission to make
Oh,
the
I see.
approval.
Okay.
And just because of the tight timeline, and also in order to get everyone's feedback, if we do that outside of a public meeting,
I see. Okay.
then we violate the Brown Act. But that's a great point. So for this one, we most definitely will bring it back, and we'll do a review in a meeting like this, and the public can comment on it.
Wonderful.
And we'll
Thank
make
you
sure
so
it's
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Zach, you said something earlier that really piqued my interest,
Yeah.
and I'll just be straightforward. Like, I don't think that the mailers are, that effective for the amount of money that we're going to pay for them. But you mentioned text messages, right?
Yeah.
This is what I like about that, and this is why I think that we should go down to the quarter-page mailer and maybe come to a vote tonight, if everyone's willing. But with the text messages, you're confronted with the text message, right? With a mailer, like you guys said, I see it's a mailer, it's going in the trash. With a text message, like, oh, who's this? Redistricting? If anything, it puts it in your head, and you have to decide, whether you're going to hit the link or not. And even if you don't, at the very least, if you read the text message, you know that something's going on with Escondido redistricting, right? So is that something that we would go to the outreach team for?
Yeah, that would be Teresa and Mike. And actually, if we recall, it was something that we discussed prior to going out to try and request bids from other groups that were potentially going to do a variety of things, text messaging, mailers, and all of that. So for me, now that the budget can be adjusted slightly and we have a bit more flexibility, this does open up the door for us to look at something in addition to what we would do just beyond the postcard. But it would have to be we have to do both, because we want to reach those who are engaged technologically, on their devices, but those who also are just going to be looking at their mail. So I would say if I had direction from the commission to go back to Teresa and Michael and say, hey, we want to do some form of a text messaging campaign, we could actually explore that and see what that would cost. And if for $10,000 we can reach X thousand number of individuals, then we could go about doing so. Now, this is something that is done. It's not uncommon. So it's something that I think is feasible for us. It would just be a matter of if the commission would want us to go in that direction. We originally kind of wanted to do that if we were going to have a more robust outreach. And I would say this would be an opportunity now that we have potentially more flexibility with our budget right now.
So what do we think about the mailer size? Is this something that we're going to come to a consensus to email the PR team as they requested at this meeting? Or do we want to punt and wait to get some more numbers with, okay, if we go down to the quarter size, how much are we going to save? And then what is the cost of the text message mailer? And then come to...
So I can speak to that just briefly on that as the commission is making their decision tonight. One of the things that Teresa had mentioned to me is that the group that she was trying to solicit a quote from was very hesitant to give them an informal quote, like a ballpark estimate. They wanted to give them a formal one, but then it's only valid for 30 days at that time. And just with the frequency of our meetings, what Teresa was indicating is that it would be very helpful for her to have clear direction to go to them and say, I want a quote for a quarter page or a half page, and then we can bring that back during our November meeting, and then we can execute a contract with them. Otherwise, we would delay it, and because of the time frame that we're at right now, where we want to do this outreach in December, because the meetings start in January, I would be hesitant to delay too much further. We can make a decision on the text messaging at a future meeting, because that's just an idea at this point. But I would say, for the purposes of what Teresa is saying, I think that it would be helpful to have a consensus on the size of the the postcard.
Okay, I'd like to propose a vote if we can.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so let's do it by full page, half page, and quarter page. So all those in favor of a, yes?
And one moment before you take a vote, I just saw Christy just would like to have another comment. So Vice Chair Jorgensen, feel free to come into the meeting. Sorry about that.
Sorry about butting in. And just before we vote, just as kind of a reminder of what we get in the mail, a quarter is really small. Those get lost within the mail, or they get tucked behind a bill or something like that. Is that a quarter maybe too small? And that the half size may stick out a little bit more because it's a little bit bigger than actual mail size. So like this, right? So just keeping that in mind, that quarter may be a little too small, that it will get lost. So thank you.
Great point. And Commissioner Saldana, did you have anything you would like to add? I apologize. I don't want to make sure you're included if you'd like.
No, I don't have anything to add at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to propose a vote, all commissioners in favor of a full-size mailer.
We'd have to have a motion in a second. So
Oh,
yeah, let's
delay my
take
last.
a motion first. So
So can I make I'll make the first motion. So I motion that we go with the full page mailer, and part of that motion will be to ensure that whatever is designed gets commissioner approval before it's sent. So that's the first motion, it's for the full page.
I was second.
So all those commissioners in favor of the motion, what do we do? Say aye?
let's raise your hand, and then I'll be able to know for the commissioners on Zoom as well. So those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And then I see none, so that motion fails 0-7.
Okay, next motion is to go with the half-page mailer and have commissioner approval of the design.
Do we have a second?
I'd like to second the motion.
Right, second by Reyes. All those in favor, please raise your hand. So I see 1, 2. And then we have Commissioner Saldana and then Commissioner Jorgensen. So that is a pass, 4-3. So we're going with a half page, so I'll go back to Teresa with that. So thank you all for the discussion. That was great. And now we'll pivot on to the next item. And this is actually going to be from Jane Hood from Q2 Data. For those in the public who might be watching this, their first meeting attending, Q2 Data is our demographer. They actually are going to assist us with all the formal line drawing and map drawing and guiding us through that process. They actually ran the process for Escondido back in 2013 as well. And here we are. So Jane, please take it from here.
Thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners, and good evening, members of the public who are joining us here tonight or virtually on Zoom. As was mentioned, my name is Jane Hood, and I'm from Q2 Data and Research. We're very excited to be partnering with Escondido on the redistricting process. As was shared with the commissioners in a previous email from Zach, we have conducted our current assessment of your city council boundaries. This means that the data from the census did become available for California redistricting purposes about a month ago. Then we were able to take that data and look at your current district boundaries to see how over or underpopulated your districts are right now. So obviously those districts were drawn in 2013. They were at the time using 2010 data. So that data is now over 10 years old. So obviously some updates and changes have happened in the last 10 years for your city and throughout the California as well. So I'd like to share the results of that, and this will help guide everyone's process as we move forward to look about how we want to adjust, or how you want to adjust those boundaries in accordance with trying to have more equally populated districts. So I'm not sure if I'm able to share my screen and I could show this, or if everyone has a copy of the map already that they've seen via email.
I'm going to try and put you on, Jane. It's just we might get some feedback. That's the only downside. So I'm going to, we'll try and see.
Thank you so much.
All right. go for it. And if there's a little feedback, I hope everyone's okay with that.
Oh, I'm still seeing that screen sharing is disabled.
Just going to go walk back to our IS department, see if they can help us with that. One moment.
Thank you so much. So just while that's being figured out, as a reminder or an overview for folks who are new to this process, the first criterion when we are drawing these maps will be to have equally populated districts. So we're trying to get to roughly having the same number of people in each district. This allows for what we call one person, one vote. So this is very essential to obviously voting rights in this country, making sure that everyone has fair and equal representation. There aren't districts that are much larger than a smaller district who will maybe get less representation due to that size differential. So when we're looking at redistricting and readjusting these boundaries, we're trying to get to pretty equally populated districts. In general, you do have a little bit of wiggle room. The safe harbor, as it's called, is about plus or minus 5%. So you can go a little bit over, a little bit under what's called the ideal population, but you're going to be looking to be, roughly close to that.
All
Okay,
right.
I think I am able to
You should
share
be
my
able to
screen
now.
now. Thank you so much. Hopefully everyone can see this. This is the map of your current city council district boundaries. So you'll note that District 1 and 2 are actually outside of that plus or minus 5% bounds. So they're over and under populated. We have District 1 at minus 7.18%. So that's 7.18% below what's called the ideal population. I'll pause and just share that overview quickly. So the total population you'll see at the bottom for the City of Escondido, and this is for redistricting purposes only, because as we've shared, redistricting in California uses adjusted census data. So the adjusted census data for the City of Escondido is 151,516 people. And then we'll divide that by your 4 districts, and that tells us roughly where we want each of these districts to end up, which is at 37,879. And so for District 1, we're actually 7.18% below that ideal population as it stands currently. You'll see District 2 in red on this map, and that is overpopulated currently. It's over by 7.43%. Districts 3 and 4 in green and blue on this map are actually pretty close to the ideal population. So District 3 is underpopulated just a little bit by 0.55%, and District 4 is overpopulated just a little bit by 0.29%. So right now, those are pretty close to the ideal population, and of course, we have Districts 1 and 2, which are a little bit further from that ideal population. So that is what our current, what your current districts look like based on the released census data. So that's our analysis that we have to offer you. Obviously, the public and the commission will get to make the decisions about how to move forward with this information. But I'm happy to answer any questions right now about this map or the census data generally. And with that, I'll pass it to any questions. Thank you.
And any members of the public, I don't see anyone raising their hand or anyone, but if anyone from the public on Zoom would like to speak, now would be an opportunity. Any members in the public here in the council chambers would like to speak on this item at all? Yeah, if you'd like to, you can come up to the podium. Yeah, use the microphone. And you'll have 3 minutes, Michael Hefner. Yeah.
So my name is Michael Hefner, and I would just request that when you are looking at the map, and I would imagine that the yellow is District 1.
Yes.
That you're going to be probably taking away from District 2 to add to that section. And I would imagine that District 1 is more concentrated within the metropolitan city scope, that I would look at District 2 of staying within that condensed area and leaving out whatever would be the rural area for the I believe you'd call it a CI view. So when it comes time for you guys to look at the redistricting of that area and everything, that you take more of the condensed area, so that way it's more in the like of what is already in District 1.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any comments?
I do have a comment and also a question. So if I'm looking at the map right now, and it looks definitely that District 1 needs some share of the other district as well. And District 2, it's the plus 7%. It's overwhelming, larger than any other district. So the question for us, and also for whoever advising how to divide these districts, is that number one, is that if we are going to draw the district line, I know that at the last couple meetings, either Dr. McDonald mentioned that each district would have to have certain amount of population. I think she mentioned I forgot what that was, but it has to be equally divided between those 4 districts. Now, I'm looking at the map, and I hear what the public had just mentioned. How are we going to do that, just to make sure that we are, number one, justify of drawing the district line? Number two, each of the districts should have certain representation of the minority equally. And I'm concerned by looking at this map right now.
I'll defer to Jane on that, but we have to follow the California Voting Rights Act and the Federal Voting Rights Act, and the areas that we need to be looking at are to make sure the districts are compact, they're contiguous, and they take into consideration communities of interest. So when we go through the process during January and February of obtaining public input and soliciting that public input, we will be requesting that people inform us of what their communities of interest may be. It might be a geographical interest, it might be a language interest. There's all sorts of elements that could be associated with that would inform the commission's decision as to how the map ends up being drawn. So this preliminary information that we have right now just informs us as to where it looks like there might be a trend going of what districts might need to be changed a bit more than others, but we will not get into the process of actually making that type of decision until January and February, if that makes sense. And then we did have one member of the public who does want to speak on Zoom. Laura, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, Laura Hunter again. So I did submit some questions on the redistricting email, so hopefully those can get put in the mix. But and having gone through the county redistricting process, which is a little bit ahead of where Escondido's redistricting is, I really encourage the commission to not view this as just a shuffling people around to get the numbers right. Yeah. I mean, this is a really, really important process that's going to last for 10 years, as you know, and it's really an opportunity to think about for the first time what really makes sense for representation for Escondidans. I would hope that you just wipe out all of the lines that we had from before. I saw recently that Escondido was 52% Latino at this point, or or BIPOC community, or people of color. So really that should mean that there would be 2 districts of the 4 that would have a very high percentage or be majority BIPOC communities. And so I think that would be really important, and you're not going to get there by just dividing up the BIPOC community into 4 parts. That just dilutes that community's ability to be represented. Yeah. So in terms of compactness, our city is not very compact. That's a crazy sprawl that we see on the thing there. So I think I would ask that you really do a deep dive into terms of culture, ethnicity, income, even the zoning, because some of the what's rural, what's single family, kind of sprawl type, what is more urban and near transportation corridors. So I'm hoping all of these things will factor into your decision. And I know it's hard, but I really hope that you will make sure that the future districts are representative of the people who live there. Just a last point is 3 of our 5 current elected officials, only 2 have actually been elected by 50% of the voters in those districts. The other 3 were 2 are like 38%, 37, 39%, and a 47%. So I know this isn't about politics, but it is about representation. So these districts have yielded a majority of the city council that is not elected by a majority of the voters in their district. And so I think that begs the question on representation. So I'm glad to be earlier engaging in this process. I've lived in Escondido for 30 years, and I really hope that you'll take this opportunity to really think deeply about the best representative way to draw those districts and not just shuffle people around. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. And then Chair Case, and then I believe Mr. Heffner has another comment. But yes, Chair Case.
So 2 things that I just want to put out there so that everyone, the commission, but especially the public, is aware of, because even these monthly meetings that we have, there's still, we still want to fulfill our education piece of this process, right? So to address the gentleman's point here in the chambers, so one of the 5 things that, the criteria that we're required pursuant to the consent decree is that the district shall be contiguous, right, and drawn to encourage compactness. So that's actually the 3rd highest ranking consideration that we as a commission take into consideration. So just a heads up with that. Ms. Hunter, thank you so much for your informed input. I want to touch on a few things that you brought up to just make sure that the public is tracking on all this. Again, going back to the criteria of drawing these maps via the consent decree, communities of interest, I know that race is when it comes to voting rights, it's definitely something that's on people's minds. But the race is kind of like a sub element of the community of interest criteria, which would be the 4th ranking criteria via the consent decree, right? So I want to make sure that the public's clear that race and demographics and community of interest are very important, but that's a component of a broader picture that by law we're responsible, to take into consideration. You also brought up a great point as far as Escondido being 52% Hispanic and the dilution of voting, power within those communities. I wanted to hear from Ms. Hood in regards to the concept of racially polarized voting, what that means, and how that will play into this equation, so to speak.
Yes, thank you so much, Commissioner, for your question and for the comments from the public. This is a great discussion. I'm happy to touch on a few of these points that you also very well explained. So the first, to answer that question directly, the next component of our analysis work before we're drawing those lines will be to conduct what's called a preliminary voting rights analysis. So we will be doing that. That's our next step. After this population analysis, we move on to criterion number 2, which is, as mentioned, the Federal Voting Rights Act. And this does protect the protected class of voters. So that is racial and language minorities. So in that, we'll be looking at all of these considerations and report back our findings to the commission as well as your city attorneys about how to move forward with our conclusions. So in that step of the process, we will be looking at whether or not we can draw districts that allow for representation of those protected class of minorities. And that's the first step of that analysis. So we will be able to share those results with you when they become available, probably at the next meeting. And we'll work with your city attorneys closely to ensure that we are following that law to the fullest extent here when drawing our lines. The next point to touch on, as has been mentioned, of course, communities of interest is a very important criterion to this process, and we do look forward to and highly encourage community members to start thinking about where their communities are. Maybe their communities fall on the lines of these current districts. Maybe they fall already in one of the district boundaries, but wherever they are, we do want to know about them. And so that when we are redrawing these lines, we don't inadvertently split them up. So if obviously we know that some of these lines will have to move just based on this population analysis we've provided. Of course, you can decide to move based on other factors, but right now in this initial phase, population is the only data that we've looked at so far. So that's what we were sharing with you tonight. But as has been mentioned, there's many other criteria that go into this. Of course, communities of interest, Federal Voting Rights Act legislation, compactness, contiguity. So all of these things we will be looking at in ranked order, the first one being population, which is what we shared with you tonight. So hopefully that answers a few of those questions. Happy to continue on with more.
Thank you. And just real quick, before we move forward with the discussion, the consent decree that I discussed, along with any and all information documentation that we discuss in these meetings, are all available online at the Escondido Recommission. So if you have any questions about the criteria or what the consent decree actually is, please feel free to check that out on the website.
And Mr. Hefner, did you have any other comments? I know you still have about a minute and a half left if you'd like. Yeah.
My name is Michael Hefner, and I think she answered my question. I think there probably needs to be a couple more maps that are put together. On this particular map here, you know, if we had where maybe main streets are or highways, so that way we can kind of know where these maps are in relationship to the city, would be extremely helpful. And then also when it comes time to do the portion of the, I guess you can say, ethnicity of the group, so that way I heard earlier that we have Mandarin and Tagalog and all those. If we could know where they are on those particular maps, the Hispanic communities, so that way when those maps are drawn, that those communities are actually kept together as much as possible, so that way they have a voice. And if we had that available on a map format of where these communities actually are, it would be also helpful to be able to have that group together when it comes time as well.
That's a great point.
Okay.
And on that note, thank you, Mr. Hefner. So on that note, and for the public watching and for those on Zoom, we have an interactive map on the city's website right now where we can zoom in. And I might pull that up here in a moment for everyone to see, where we can kind of zoom in and see the actual deviation. And that idea is great about the language. I can work with our GIS department to see if they have various heat maps from GIS where we can overlay various data, you know, everything from our tree canopies to, you know, all sorts of data. So I'm sure we could find some sort of a language element and then include that as part of the process. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Very
okay.
helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner, would you like me to pull up that map on the to show everyone where we could zoom in? Would that be helpful, Chair Case?
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. And while you do that, another thing, you're on the money with a lot of this stuff, right? But another thing that I would like to make you aware of, as well as the public, is that there are interactive mapping tools online where you can essentially draw a map the way that you would like to see it, right? It gets submitted to us, and then that is one of the pieces of the puzzle that we take into consideration when we draw the preliminary and the final map. So I think just to give you one, if you Google drawmycacommunity.org, is that it? Drawmycacommunity.org. That's just one of the many free map drawing applications. And we love to hear that. We need that. We want to see what the public thinks the city should look like.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. To answer that question, so Chair Case, so here's the map, the Draw My Community tool, so anyone can go in here and actually draw maps and look at it. So feel free to take a look. That's the URL up top. For the City of Escondido, if you would like to actually see the maps that are interactive, if you just go to the government page, click on the City Council, and then there's going to be a little thing here at the bottom that says find or identify my council member. And when you click on this, it brings up a map of all the districts and which council members represent which specific districts. And you can enter in an address in Escondido. Let's just enter in City Hall's address, and then it'll show you where that district is and then who the representative is. Obviously the mayor, and then for this one, we're in District 2, so it'd be Councilmember Insco. But if you go in deeper, I'm so sorry, the other way. If you go in deeper, you can actually start to see the where the lines draw according to the different streets. So this is a very detailed map that you can take a look at. So it's just on the city's website. You can go onto it. And then if you want additional information about redistricting, I'll just pull it up for the public's edification. You go to the city's website, Redistricting Commission, and there's all sorts of things we can look at: documents, information, maps, public noticing. And like we were talking about with the different languages previously, we have to do all different languages. So right now we're producing all these agendas in Spanish, Tagalog, Mandarin, Vietnamese, English. So there's a treasure trove of information on here, so I'd highly recommend everyone taking a look at it. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful as we're looking at it. So any other questions or comments regarding the data from Q2 data?
Can I just jump in and highlight one more thing that we have on the website right now for folks who are already thinking about submitting their community of interest? So thank you so much to Chair Case for highlighting drawmycacommunity.org. We actually have instructions for how to use that on website, which I'll just link in the chat. So if you do want to use an online mapping tool to draw your community of interest, there are instructions for how to use that and then how to submit that to the commission so that we can get that information and use that as we're drawing lines. If technology isn't your best friend or you're not maybe comfortable or have access to drawing online communities of interest, there are also instructions for just how to fill out a written form. So you just have to write, either print it out or you can email in the information, which I'll also link for people who want to take a look at that as well. So obviously we have time to be collecting these communities of interest, and that's what a lot of our public hearings will be coming next year. But of course, anyone who is starting to think about this and wanting to share this with community members, please do so and get this. It's all on the website already, so please feel free to take a look at it. So thank you for those points.
And I do just want to make one more comment that communities of interest are determined by the public. So anyone can put in there what their community is and where they think their community lies. And, the more people do that, the better it is for us to ensure that, the districts are representative.
Any other comments? And let me check on Zoom real quick, make sure no one else from the public. One moment. I see Laura Hunter's hand is up. And Laura, you had used your 3 minutes already during the first time, but 30 seconds would be sufficient. So
No, that was a mistake. I forgot to put it down.
Oh, sorry about that. No problem. I do not see any others. Vice Chair Jurgensen, Commissioner Saldana, no. Okay. Any other comments from the commission? This was just informational only. Commissioner Reynoso, yes.
Yes, I love this communities of interest form and allowing people to submit their communities of interest online so that people who may work during this time can still submit comments. I'm wondering if we can convert it into some sort of easy fillable online form like a Google form or SurveyMonkey or something like that, so that people don't necessarily need to print out this form, fill it in, and then scan it and then email it, assuming they have a printer/scanner, or come into City Hall to drop it off. Just, reducing the number of barriers that people have to overcome in order to participate. So it would be great to have some type of online fillable form. And then my other recommendation based off of our discussion it would be great to have this draft map updated. Even if it's just a JPEG or some form on the redistricting website you just shared on that main page so that people can easily start to see the results of the information. I know we'll talk about it in a bit, but I got a lot of questions about that during the street fair, just what's our updated data, and I gave them a general estimate, but this particular map that gives the population estimates by district are really helpful for people and provide a lot of context on where we need to go moving forward.
Just to echo the point, that is a really good point. I didn't even think about that, like how clumsy that is to have to, like, even like Adobe, right? You needed special edition to like type it in. So if we could talk to the webmaster.
Definitely, yeah, that's very feasible. That's a great idea, Commissioner Reno. So we can convert that into a survey. Like, I like that also because it's easily to share to other people too. And yeah, so great idea. We'll do that. Any other comments? Otherwise, we can shift over to the budget discussion if you'd like. All right, let's do that. Let me just pull up the items. So for some context, for those who are watching on Zoom and those who are here in person, last meeting we went over our budget and looking at a way to move forward. The commission approved back in January the total budget that we have allocated is $200,000, and we have various options now when it comes to how we're going to allocate these resources, specifically when we're looking at this section right here where we're offering the in-person translation and the virtual translation. And the discussion came up, we're required by the consent decree to offer translation in Mandarin, Tagalog, Spanish, English, and Vietnamese at all these different public hearings that are going to take place during January and February. But we are not required to do so virtually, so that is an option. But right now, if we were to have that allocated in both directions, it would be $60,300 is the estimate right now, and that would bring our total budget to that point right here, about $199,673. We did some digging, and basically if we shift over and only do in-person translation at the meetings, the cost is $37,200, which then brings our total budget to $176,573, and then that provides us with more buffer to be able to do additional public outreach and provides us with a bit more resources. So once again, big picture overarching all of this for the commission is that if we need additional funding, if we need additional resources, we can obtain that. That is not something that is out of the question, but it's also a matter of if it's not necessary for us to do so, we can still hit our targeted budget of $200,000 and accomplish all the goals that have been set out based off of what we have in front of us right now. So the biggest question that I would have for you in wanting to proceed is, would you like to do translation in person and virtually, or just do translation in person? And bearing in mind that these meetings are going to be taking place at various locations throughout the city, so we are doing our best to come to people where they are at, and people obviously are going to participate electronically via Zoom as well, but it's just totally up to the commission's discretion how you want to allocate these resources. So any questions you have, and I'm going to pop over the computer in case there's any questions from the public too, but any commissioners, please. Oh, one moment. It looks like the Zoom meeting might have. Yeah. No, we have a larger account, but it's just gone. Let me check with our IS team in the back. Yeah. Might have happened when I had given the host responsibilities over to Jane, and when she logged out. So let me see if we can. So she could share her thing. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Sorry. All right, everyone's still here. Got it. All right, can everyone hear me on Zoom? Can you hear me? Christy, sorry for the technical difficulties. Georgine, you're still here. Laura. Okay, great. Sorry about the technical glitch there, and we're back to the commission meeting. Sorry. Any questions, comments about the budget?
So
Recording in progress.
That's good to know. So to sum up what you were just saying, we can save approximately $30,000 by eliminating the virtual translation, which is not required by law, right?
Correct. Yeah, about 23,000, 23,000, yeah.
So here's my thoughts on that, since everyone's being shy today. Maybe it's the weather. Someone once told me, if everything's important, nothing is important, right? We want to have the broadest, most inclusive outreach that we can, but with that being said, having a $300 buffer in the budget, that's not a good thing, right? So if we can save $30,000 and still be within the letter of the law, we've already discussed at this meeting different ways that we can, for example, the text message outreach, right? So that's my thought with that. In a perfect world, I would say let's get as much translation services as we can. But unfortunately, that's not what we're dealing with here with the budget. So those are my thoughts.
And before we carry on, I just want to make sure, since Vice Chair Jorgensen and Commissioner Saldana got dropped during that portion of the budget, I just want to bring you up to speed in regards to what we discussed. So there's basically a budget allocation that we had for $60,300 to do virtual translation and in-person translation for the upcoming public hearings. But then we have the option of doing just in-person translation where someone's going to be there as a translator. That's what we're legally required to do by the consent decree. And if we just do that, you can see on the slide, if the screen comes up, it's $37,200 for that. And basically, so it reduces the cost by approximately $23,000. And now that's kind of the discussions to determine if you want to offer both virtual and in-person, or if you just want to do in-person translations. That's the discussion, just to kind of bring you guys up to speed on that. So carrying on, commissioners, any other dialogue?
Zach, I think you had mentioned before the use of translation via Zoom, right? And how often it was used?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Reyes. So in regards to the translation services that were offered, speaking specifically of in-person, when we did this process of redistricting back in 2017 in Oceanside, where I was a city clerk at the time, we had translation services available at all of the public meetings. No one utilized them during those meetings, and the few times that people did need translation, they actually had a family member or a friend, usually sitting next to them, who was actually doing the translation. But we offered that as a requirement, but also we wanted to make sure that people had it if they didn't have someone to assist them. Zoom, personally, I actually haven't participated in that, so I do not know the level of involvement or adoption that people are using for that. It would be new territory for myself personally if we were to do Zoom, and I apologize for that.
No, that's good. I just wanted to recap. Yeah. Maybe that could help us decide a little bit more where we stand on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Reyes that generally use of interpretation services via Zoom is rare for public meetings, and that I think we had discussed last time around that maybe we can do one of the public hearings online Zoom translated into Spanish, and the other Tagalog, Mandarin, and Vietnamese, and then have those recorded and then uploaded to YouTube so they can be used at a later meeting, so that there could, at least the information presented could be provided in that language virtually at least once, and that we would direct people during that meeting who do speak those languages to the in-person events where there would be interpretation services provided for the remainder of the 5 public hearings and the 3 public meetings after that.
I'm going to do the math on that real quick because I do have the quote pulled up here. So if we were to do it just for one meeting, it would be $2,322. So it'd basically bring our total up to, roughly around, $39,522. So if we were to just do one meeting of virtual translation.
And that would be for all 4 of the languages?
For Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. Yeah.
What do you all think?
That sounds great. It sounds like a great compromise.
Great. Questions or thoughts on that? Yes.
I do. I have a comment. So I wanted to make sure I understand that if we only do one virtual translation meeting, the cost would increase to $39,000 something.
Yeah, it would increase by $2,322. So it'd bring the total up to 37,200 to 39,522.
Okay, and then the rest of the virtual meeting would be in English and then translate through a translation tape afterward? Okay.
No, so to clarify that, so what would happen is at those all the meetings will be done hybrid. We'll have a virtual component and then an in-person component. Right now, at all 9 of those meetings, we will have to have a physical person here to translate in all of the 4 of those languages. And then for the virtual meetings, we'll have virtual meeting at all 9 of those public hearings, but we'd only have one time when we would have a separate Zoom room to have translation services available. The remaining 8, we wouldn't do that, and there wouldn't be a translation after the fact.
Oh, I see, okay.
And I see it, sorry, after you finish, Vice Chair Jorgensen, please continue, Commissioner Down, sorry.
My last comments is this, and I do hear, Chair Case, your reasoning for being concerned about the increase of the budget, and I understand, when we are utilizing the public funding, we have to be very cognizant of what we're doing. However, the redistricting is very important for the City of Escondido, and I wanted to bring us all back to diversity and inclusion that we are focusing on right now. We wanted to make sure that we include in providing the services that would represent the diversity and inclusion goal that, around we are now focusing on now. And one of those is translation, making sure that the services is available to all community that represent in that language. So having said that, I understand that 39,000 representing a lot of funding that we have to expand. But if we're looking at the goal that we are trying to make sure that we are focusing on diversity and inclusion within our redistricting goal, I think it would be a worthwhile of doing that. So, and the reason why I said that, because I had the opportunity to participate in one of those virtual team meeting with all the with all the manager, and within that team meeting we provided a presentation. We're discussing a goal, and within that presentation they're providing translation for Spanish translation among the managers. And just to show you that even though among the managers we speak English and we other people speak Spanish, but because they're representing the walk the talk for diversion, inclusion, diversity and inclusion. When you walk the talk, you have to make sure that you do it. And I really respect that. I thought it was very well represent the goal. And I would like for all of us to start thinking of, diversity and inclusion, everything that we do, so that we can provide translation for the needy communities. Thank you. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Jorgensen, and then we have a public comment from Zoom. But yes, Vice Chair Jorgensen.
Thank you. So my comment is that we talked about this last week, and I appreciate thinking about budget and everything of that nature. But I thought we were going to do it within each of the districts. Were we only going to just choose one meeting? I just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Jorgensen. And Commissioner Reynoso, did you? Oh, yeah. To answer your question, so from the discussion that happened during the previous meeting, we are going to have all of our meetings happening in all the districts. We have an equivalent number of meetings happening in each district during January and February. And then we have one meeting that's happening at the Escondido Library, which we are classifying as a citywide meeting because it's it's really close to the boundary of all of the districts. But as far as the discussion last time of a virtual translation, we were only having that discussion for one meeting as opposed to 4. And then it would just continuously increase the budget, but it's something that we'd already built into the budget of having virtual and in-person translation services available. But the discussion came up last meeting regarding if we wanted to allocate additional resource towards public outreach, and that's kind of what spurred on this discussion. So we can still proceed accordingly, but if we do that, we will we either have to go for a budget adjustment if we want to do additional funding for public outreach, like text messages or doing some of the things that we just previously discussed, or we could, not offer that additional service and just adhere to the consent decree and simply do the in-person translation.
So it's an all or nothing. It's not where we could do translation in each of those districts.
We could, and then if we did that, let me pull up the calculator here. I think I had said it was around, I'm just going to use around 2,300 times by 4. So it would increase the budget, 9,200 roughly. So it'd bring us from 37,000 to somewhere over 46,000, and that would still leave us with a bit of a buffer. It just depends upon, if we would want to do that. So it's up to the discretion of the commission if we would like to have that virtual translation service offered.
Okay, because I like what Commissioner Dow said about having those translations available and having that inclusiveness at each of those districts, the very first meeting, and then from there, saying, hey, please come to our meetings in person in all of those and still save us some money, because I definitely am about not spending as much money as we need to. Okay, so that's just my thoughts. Can we find a compromise within those, or is it the all or nothing? So, thank you.
And then we had one comment from Laura Hunter on this. Says, I think the world of virtual participation has really evolved since the pandemic. The county does it a lot. Translation, especially to a city over 50% Latinx, would be important. Please be sure that there is at least a presentation translated on the city website. And there we will have translated materials as we currently have on the website, and we'll continuously have translated materials on the website as we're going through this process as well. But any other questions from the commissioners? And then also for our members of the public, Mr. Hefner, any comment? Perfect. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, so one, I'd like to thank Ms. Hunter for her service to our community of San Diego as a county redistricting commissioner, so thank you for that. Two, I think that we're being a little too apprehensive when it comes to requesting an increase in the budget. This body was not put here, the budget and the money is taking up a considerable amount of our time in our meetings, and that's not why this body is here, right? We only have one shot to do this every 10 years, right? So I don't think that asking for an additional $20,000, $30,000 is something that we should be shy about if this, this product is important and it's going to stand for the next decade, right? So I think that we should really examine and not, yes, we all agreed on the original $200,000 budget, but things have changed. We're in a different place now, and I don't think that we should be so shy when it comes to a process so important. I don't think even the commission would want us to spare any expense, so to speak. So just putting that out there, and I'd really appreciate feedback on how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, we do have, just on that note, thanks, Chair Case, Commissioner Saldana, and then we have another comment from Lillian from Zoom. So Commissioner Saldana. Okay.
Hi, thank you. Just want to start off with saying I really, appreciate this conversation and, this discussion. It's very important, as Laurel keeps saying, So just going off of that, I definitely agree that the budget shouldn't be such an impediment, because it's almost like, we're just focusing a lot on that. And I understand that it's very important. We wouldn't want to spend money that we're not going to use, but at the end of the day, if we don't use that money, wouldn't it just go back to the city, if I'm correct? And also, I just want to make sure, as Laura Hunter pointed out, that the world, especially with the pandemic, the virtual world has expanded so much, and so many people rely on this now. And that pandemic hasn't ended, so it's just something that people are still doing, still relying on. And I just wouldn't want us to be put in a spot where we're trying to be so inclusive, where the potential of excluding one person or one group would just lead us to not being inclusive. And I think that's super important. I just want us to be very inclusive. And, the budget, yes, is important, but we definitely should be thinking more about offering the services that we can offer, like, to the most potential. I hope that makes sense. That's just my input. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Saldana. And then Lillian Serrano, your turn. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I actually have some more of a comments. I have questions, and part of it is because I've been trying to follow this conversation around translating materials and translation available at the meetings. But there's a few logistical things that they just still, I'm not able to fully understand. And also, I would like to really thank the commission for really not being shy about engaging in this conversation, and how can we make sure that logistical challenges like language, right, are not a barrier for all of our residents to really engage in this process. My questions are, we're talking about translation, but as a bilingual person myself, and as someone that, my work in a daily is to work with Spanish speakers to engage and the civic participation at different levels. I know that translation looks very different in different people's minds. So my question is specific, is the translation going to be provided only for the commissioners? Meaning if a Spanish-speaking community member were to come to the meeting, are they gonna be able to provide their public comment in Spanish and that will be translated to the commissioners? Or are they, and also the other way around, right? Are they gonna be able to sit through the meeting and be able to receive simultaneous translation from the comments being posed by the commissioners and other community members? That is one of my questions. The other, and it's in regards of like the multiple language that we're talking about providing services. I understand that there were conversations and some budget allocations around community engagement, but it's some of that community outreach. Some of that community outreach is gonna be dedicated to groups that do work with this specific language that we're talking about. Are we gonna have a specific group that will have some budget allocation to do outreach in the Tagalog community and the Vietnamese community and the Spanish community? Because even though having translation available, it's key. And don't get me wrong, I'm very excited to hear this happening in our chamber, right? In Escondido as a resident. But having that is not enough. Right? Who's going to invite them? How are community members going to even find out that this service is available? And those are my questions.
Great. Thank you, Lillian. I really appreciate that. I can answer a few of those questions for you. So as it relates to translation, the way it will actually work is that at the meetings, those who are attending from one of those languages that we referred to, if they need in real-time translation, there will be a translator there, an interpreter there, who will basically be speaking into a microphone a little bit from a farther distance back from the commission where they're actually participating in the meeting. And then there's headsets that the individual who wants to have the information translated for them will be able to wear, that then during the meeting they're hearing in real time the entire discussion of what is transpiring. And then if they wish to make a public comment during that time, the interpreter will be able to speak on their behalf during that time to make sure their comment is submitted. So it's happening in real time. In a similar sense, that would be what would be occurring via Zoom as well. If we were to have a virtual interpretation service available, it's technically a little different because there's a separate Zoom room, but the concept is the same. As it relates to outreach, that is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that we are legally required to notice and post all of our meetings in English, Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Mandarin, and that'll continue. And then part of the public outreach discussion that we had earlier was when we're doing our direct mailing, that we're reaching out to hopefully all of those languages. And those languages are identified by law, that those are the 5 primary languages for Escondido specifically that we're supposed to do this for. So we would be doing outreach in that respect to them in the capacity that we can with the budget that we have allocated and potentially additional funding that comes in. So as a result of that, I hope that answers your questions, but basically yes to the in-person translation, real time, and also if those individuals want to provide public comment, and then simultaneously we're going to be doing public outreach in all of those languages, but for the posting of the legal noticing, the public hearing notices, the actual agendas, the information that's going to be on the website, but when some of the larger mailings that we're going to do, like we said earlier, we might have one mailer that will be English on one side, Spanish on the other side, and then have a sentence at the bottom that is in all of those languages that directs people to the website or informs them of the redistricting. So that, in a nutshell, I think is kind of everything what's going on. And we did have one other comment coming from Suzanne Southwell. You have 3 minutes if you'd like to come up to the podium.
Commissioners, I'm Suzanne Southwell, and I'm trying to understand in my mind what you are laying out for the public meetings. So I believe that Mr. Beck told me 9 meetings twice over the months of January and February. And I don't know whether it's one of the 9 would be at the library in January and one in February.
Oh, and I'm so sorry to clarify, Ms. Southwell. 9 meetings total throughout the course of January and February. Not 18 meetings, nine total.
Not 18 meetings.
Not 18, yeah, 9 for both of those months.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
And then when you're talking about interpreters versus translators, and there's definitely a difference between interpreting and translating. One is word for word, the other is somewhat subjective. Then, when you're talking about headsets for real-time spoken, I don't think you have a clue how much that money is going to be.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Because, I mean, this has gone from having a person speaking, and I have gone to meetings. English is my only language. I understand some words in other languages, but English is what I speak and what I know. I have been to meetings that are Spanish and English that last 2.5 times longer, because we all stop and listen in this language and then in this language. And if you want the public to be involved, I think that you have to consider what you're really laying out here and the people that would have to be hired to do this, plus the rental of all these headsets, and know who is actually attending the meetings, in which location that you're having them in the public schools, which students, for instance, go to that public school to have an idea of what languages you're talking about. And a good many people, and I know many personally who speak Tagalog, they speak English just fine. They don't need a translator to speak in their own natural language, shall we say. The others may, I don't know. But you're considering a bigger and bigger budget and asking for more money, and I don't know that that's really necessary or prudent in the way you are describing public input. I really think that you have to study this. You can put things on your website, and you can have, do a test meeting, so to speak, to really see where this is going and whether your best intentions are really necessary. You do have to speak English in order to be a citizen of this country, and these people that you want to support had to learn English in order to be a naturalized citizen. So they have to learn English enough to even be able to vote, even though we accommodate all these other languages with voting material. And I think you just you're just making a bigger problem that I honestly don't think exists as you are describing it. We're not having meetings in 5 countries, we're having meetings in 1 city.
Thank you, Ms. Southwell. And I can answer your question, and thank you so much. So the
Well, I have a question for Ms. Southwell. if I may. Or are we allowed to ask questions?
let me, I think,
Please, thank you.
yeah. So as it relates to the translation, and I apologize, the meetings that have been happening since the beginning of January and moving forward, budget has been adopted, and part of the budget allocated for the translation was actually the acquisition of those headsets. So the city already owns them, and they're going to also be used for future meetings outside of the redistricting. So it's not just an acquisition that's solely for that.
Well, that's good.
So other public meetings that we will have will be doing translation. The process that we've gone through that's included in the budget, if you see on the screen there, it includes the, I know, I'm sorry, I wish I could zoom in on that a little more for you right now, but basically that includes the number of individuals who would actually be coming from a professional organization to actually perform the translation. And then on top of that, we are legally required to do so. And that's why the discussion right now is whether or not we're going to do so both in person and virtually, or just in person. And right now we have allocated all the resources necessary and required to do so for the in-person. That's beyond the scope of this body's jurisdiction. We just have to do that. It's up right now whether or not we want to do it virtually as well. So that's kind of the purpose of the discussion. So, but your points are well taken.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
Yeah, great. Open up to the commissioner and any questions, insights specifically about the.
Thank you so much for coming and giving us your input. I was just a little unclear on one thing that you said, though. You said these people. What did you mean when you say these people? Like, who are you referring to?
The people that might attend a meeting,
Oh, okay.
whoever they might be, because you don't know who's going to show up.
Okay. No, but when you said these people, you were using it as it related to like
In general.
language minorities. So I was just trying to get an understanding of what you meant when you said these people. But I think I understand. So thank you, Ms. Southwell.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Vice Chair Jorgensen or Commissioner Saldana? Nothing? All right. So what would be helpful as we move forward, we still have time to make a decision on this as a commission. So if we want to come back and revisit this in November, November we could. But if you decide that you want to proceed in another direction, then we can start deciding how we're going to do. If we're going to go to the council for additional funding, I would probably want to know that sooner rather than later to be able to go and do so. Or if we're deciding not to offer the virtual translation, then we know for the public outreach purposes, for our discussion we had earlier, if we're taking that 23,000 or 20,000 and allocating it in that direction. So that way, because there's a timeline associated with it. So any thoughts or questions? And I'm totally open to whatever you have.
I'd just like to make a comment real quick. I think that it's extremely important for us to be as inclusive as possible, like Commissioner Down said. I think in order to be a citizen of this country, you don't need to know English. You can be born here and never learn English. I work with the Escondido Library, where we have a literacy program, and there are plenty of people who go through that literacy program who do not have a good enough command of the English language, but that doesn't mean that their voice is not important. So I am completely supportive of spearheading, a dual in-person and virtual translation service, because I think that it's a beautiful mark that our city would be, it would be an endeavor that a lot of other folks haven't done, and I think that we owe it to our public.
Any other thoughts, questions?
I agree, and I'm going to sort of confront this body to come to direction as far as the budget goes. And before I do that, I'll say this. So within the federal rights, the Federal Voting Rights Act, the California Voting Rights Act, and the Escondido Consent Decree, right? Out of all the criterias by law, this body is required to consider, the budget is not one of them.
Correct.
Right? So I'm of the opinion of let's stop beating around the bush. This isn't any additional funds that we receive or not use it or lose it. Let's be prepared for, any and all, issues that may arise and have the funds and be able to deal with that in real time instead of having to wait for our next scheduled meeting, right? So can we vote on that tonight?
Yeah, you can vote on it tonight. You can direct me to go to the city council and request a set amount of resources to bring back to the commission. So it would be a matter of determining how much you want to ask for, and I could probably get that onto the November 17th city council agenda.
I really appreciate the totality of the conversation we've had today about inclusivity. I personally am very much in support of greater inclusion, and I think the reason we went down this conversation, as Chair Case has mentioned, is that the need for translation interpretation services, both virtually and in person, as well as our desires for a robust public outreach process, including flyers at lots of small businesses and community events, the text messaging threads on, including on WhatsApp and WeChat, the possibility of childcare and food at all the public outreach hearings in January and February. Those require additional funds. And so currently within our budget, we do not have that. And so I'm curious, before we move forward with identifying a specific amount, Zach, if you have any idea what those those other items we've discussed at previous meetings, what they would roughly cost.
Great question. So, and I'm glad you went to that, because that's the next part of the budget discussion we're going to have. So, translation first, and I did go and investigate the childcare possibility. I want to let you know that after going to the city attorney's office, they have advised us not to proceed with that due to legal liability issues. But what they did say is that, and I did some research with the city of Chula Vista, who's been going through this process right now because they have a primary election. They did offer a space at all of the different locations for children to congregate and maybe utilize coloring books and things along those lines, and that could be either supervised by a city staff member, or the parent could be there with their child and still participate in the meeting. But anything involving a formal element of childcare, our city attorney's office strongly advised us not to proceed in that direction. So that's where the conversation stands right now. But we definitely, but the city attorney's office is in support of us doing some sort of a space that's allocated to them. And then on that note, we did reach out to the schools and the locations that we're having the meeting, and they can accommodate that element for us. So it wouldn't require an additional reservation. We wouldn't need a new room or anything like that. So if for example, if a family were to come, they'd be able to drop off their child right there. They could be coloring during the meeting. The member of the family could go and participate in the meeting and then come back and then leave the meeting accordingly. And with food, that's tied into the facility reservations. So we can boost that up another $1,000 if we wanted to have that be more robust. One of the schools, I believe it was Del Lago, the eating will have to take place outside of the actual facility, whereas the other facilities you can eat inside. So it's just depends on how robust we want it to be. I was thinking a Costco type of plates, but with COVID, we want to be careful about, hopefully it's individually packaged items is what I was leaning in that direction. So, but all I'd say, kind of big picture of what the additional allocation of funding, if you want to play it safe, we could ask for another $50,000. We could ask for another $75,000. I don't know if I'd go up to 100, but I would say, probably 50 would be like a safe, ballpark range. And if you think about that, just if we go, I'll pull up the previous slide, which shows our existing budget. One moment. There we go. All right, so our existing budget right now, roughly $200,000. So if we went up $250,000, that could bump up the public outreach by, $20,000. You could, add a little bit more for facilities. So we could technically do a bit more when it comes to the public outreach. One thing I would just say though, and I think this is important, if we were to do so and have the funding allocated, we'll get approved November 17th, that we wouldn't then shift away from our existing strategy of utilizing the internal resources for public outreach, because the time it would take for us then to go out and get a quote for like $70,000, public outreach from a different agency, I don't believe we would have that in time to do the outreach in December. So I would view the resources as coming in and then just augmenting what Teresa and Michael are doing. And any other way that you want to allocate finances, we could do that. But I think $50,000 would probably be a safe bet. We wouldn't have to go back to the council again. I wouldn't expect that.
Sounds good to me. Would someone like to?
I'll make a motion to increase the budget by $50,000.
I second that motion.
Any questions or comments from Commissioner Saldana or Vice Chair Jurgensen? No. Any other comments from the commission? Commissioner Reynoso?
Oh, I just wanted to not lose a thought that our fellow member Lillian Serrano had made about the importance of funding community engagement. And I know we've discussed this in the past about potentially using some of these public outreach funds for local community organizations to do some of this outreach in language. And We were told, I forget by who at the city, that that's not possible for some legal reason, but I just really want to stress if there's some way to support financially with doing that community engagement by trusted members of the community. And for us to think about how to use some of these additional $50,000 in funds for that effort.
Great. Any other thoughts? Any questions? Okay, and then we'll proceed then with a vote. We have a motion and a second to increase the budget by $50,000, and this is going to go before the City Council. Tentatively, right now, the plan is November 17th, barring any unforeseen direction from the city attorney or city manager that I'm unaware of. So, all in favor, please raise your hand. Commissioner Saldana, hand raised. Motion approved, 7-0. Congratulations, we'll do that. We'll close up the meeting here. Let me just see if there's, we got future agenda items, anything else you'd like. Well, first of all, we need to determine when you would like the next meeting to take place. We want to have one more meeting in November, another meeting in December, so 2 more meetings before all the public hearings take place. So if you don't mind, take a look at your calendars and see what would be best. Generally, Monday evenings have been what we are looking at, so let's take a glance here. We have the opportunity on November 8th, November 15th. Might veer away from the 22nd if people are out of town for Thanksgiving that week or anything along those lines. And obviously as late as the 29th, but I might advise probably shooting for one of those earlier times in November. 8th is pretty quick because we're a few weeks away. 15th might be a good enough amount of time, but any of them work for the city.
So you said you're going to put the budget requests on calendar for November 17th?
17th, yeah.
So I think that it would be prudent to have it, our meeting on the 22nd, well, not ideally, but the 22nd or the 29th. So that way, once we have the information on our increased budget, we can move from there instead of meeting again and not knowing what's going on.
Sure, that's very feasible. Any other objections or thoughts specifically on that? Would you like to want to do just the 29th? My only concern, I know Vice Chair Jorgensen, with teaching, I don't know if the school is off that week, I'm not sure, but with any attendance issues with the public, I'm not sure if people are out of town on the 22nd for Thanksgiving week. I just don't know, but if you have a preference.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does it have to be on a Monday?
No, it doesn't. It's just all of our meetings have so far been on Monday evenings, but we could shift it to the only thing can't be on a Wednesday because of City Council, and then on Tuesday Planning Commission for Commissioner Dowens. So that would leave us a Thursday, and Thursdays are usually open for council chambers. Sometimes we have other commissions that are meeting later in the afternoon.
Okay, yeah, I was just because I agree with it. A meeting has to be after the City Council if we get that $50,000.
Yeah.
So can we do it the 18th or 19th? Because like you said, we're out of school that whole week. So of the 22nd.
There's a Historic Preservation Commission meeting on the 18th. That should be over by 5 o'clock. So we conceivably could do it on the 18th if that worked with everyone's schedule. Otherwise, we could try for the 29th if you'd like, or yeah. 18th works?
The 18th might not work for me.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I have the same comment.
Okay, all right. So for Commissioner Reyes, Commissioner Saldana, so if that's the case, might be prudent then to do the 29th, just to avoid the week of Thanksgiving. I don't know if any objections to that. Any thoughts, Commissioner Reynoso?
I'm fine with that. At that point, I think it's really important then that we decide what's going to be on the agenda for that meeting, because at that point we would really only have a month left before we kick off all the redistricting month activities. So we need to be really smart and effective with the time for that meeting.
Perfect, as you led into that discussion as for future agenda items. So on that note, as I hear it from what we've discussed, one of the things we need to do is we need to bring back the actual quote for the mailer, for the half-page mailer that was voted on earlier, the design at the same time that needs to be brought back. In addition, we need to be looking at actually, we just approved that we're going to keep the translation for in-person virtual, so there's no other work needs to be done in that respect. We'll have more census data coming in, and as Jane referred to that. So I think those are some of the main things. There's really the public outreach that needs to be completely ironed up and decided at that time that we're able to proceed. And obviously we could have another meeting, a week or 2 weeks after the fact, but those are some of the items I see coming on the agenda. Anything else? Yeah.
I have two more deliverables that I was tracking on: the text message cost,
Yes, thank you.
as well as the Google form,
Yeah,
community of interest form.
perfect. Any other items you'd like added to the agenda?
We had discussed at a prior meeting about just potential updates to the redistricting website, so it is visually appealing and similar to maybe the County of San Diego's website. I have one specific recommendation on what to move around, specifically the table of public hearing dates. If we can get that made more prominent at the top of the website with like Zoom login details or sign up for information details or whatever for those 9 public hearings, or just redesigning of the website so it's easier to navigate.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Commissioner Reynoso. So that is already, as we're aware of, that's already part of the process for Michael and Teresa. They're already on the process on the back end building out a new website design. So part of that is coming up. Any other items you'd like added, included? All right, so our next meeting is scheduled then, just so I have this confirmed, November 29th, 5 p.m. And then we have those items that are going to come before us. Commissioner reports and disclosures. We'll just go starting with Zoom and then coming from here. So Commissioner Saldana, any reports that you'd have for the group? I know you were participating in the Grand Avenue Festival. Thanks again for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that would be probably my only reports. So I had the afternoon shift. I was the last shift. Unfortunately, I think at that point, the fair was dying down a little, so I wasn't really able to have much interaction with people. But the people that I did interact with, which I think were like a handful, like 5 or so, were really interested. And, they took flyers and they were asking questions about the map and, with the standard deviation and the mean and how that's all formatted. So that was really good to, discuss with the community members. So yeah, I think overall probably it was a success. I mean, I only talked to a few people, but I'm sure Commissioner Reynoso and the chair, they probably had more interactions and can talk more on that and how that went.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Saldana. Vice Chair Jorgensen? No report. Thank you so much. Commissioner Reyes?
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Commissioner Dallin? Chair Case?
I was interviewed by Joe Tash of the San Diego Union Tribune. No, I'm just bringing it up because I have to. It's cool, but okay. So that, and then I think you disseminated that interview. Another thing that also at the fair or the event on Saturday or Sunday, we had like 2 council members stop by.
Oh, nice.
The booth, right? But it was completely, no political talk or anything like that. Just for the record, to be super transparent. And then my last thing is, as far as disclosures and like public involvement, I've noticed a lot of the people that are giving input have a really vested interest and are affiliated in some way with community organizations. For example, Ms. Serrano is with the Friends Committee on National Legislation, right? So my ask is, I know we can't make anyone disclose any information, but when we have people speak, can we ask if they're affiliated with an organization or if they would like to let us know that,
yeah,
so to speak, right?
Yeah, we can ask them of that. We can't require that of them. We can, their name, and I apologize, because of virtual, it's a slightly different dynamic, because normally when someone comes up at the podium, you'll hear them and they'll have a speaker slip that's filled out, and I'm seeing the names on the virtual, so I know and I'm taking that in the minutes, who's speaking. But as it relates to requesting that information, we can ask that they disclose that, but they're not required to.
Right, so that's what I'm asking, can we tweak that in as far as our protocol? And the reason I asked is because, you know, like Ms. Serrano, Ms. Southwell, Ms. Hunter, Mr. Hefner, right? A lot of these individuals, right, are connected with these organizations that are vital to our success as far as getting outreach to the public, right? So I see all these individuals here and that have contributed online as force multipliers in what we're trying to do, which is get the message out to the public. So again, full transparency, the commission would like to be aware of that so that we can just, you know, stay on top of where our message is going.
That makes sense. And for disclosure, which were the two council members that stopped by the booth?
Tina Insco.
Okay.
And then you were on the first shift, Commissioner? Right, did he stop by or he?
So I guess I can share. So I had the morning shift at the street fair from roughly 9 a.m. to 12:30. I think I was there. I went at the very beginning of the shift just so that we can ensure that we had people moving, because we were geographically very kind of off to the side from the rest of the fair. I went to the local Republican Party, the local Democratic Party, and the only city council person who had a booth at the time, and that was Joe Garcia. And I shared a few flyers with each of them and just let them know that this process is happening. They were all aware. And that they can, if any residents, visitors had questions about the redistricting process, they can funnel those people over to our booth. And while I was there, I spoke to about 36 or so members of the public. Some of them, or most of them were only there for a few minutes, maybe had a question or two. A couple members of the public had many questions over there, more for like 20 or 30 minutes. So we had very in-depth conversations. But I did not have in-depth conversations with any of the city council people about the redistricting process. It was more informational.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Reynoso. Commissioner Clemens, anything else?
Nothing for me.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to those who participated on Zoom. Thanks for the members of the public who participated here in council chambers. Our next meeting will be November 29th at 5 p.m. via Zoom and in person. Feel free, as always, visit the website, email the city directly, redistricting@escondido.org, and I hope you guys have a great night. We're adjourned.
Night, everybody.